Hi, welcome to Sweet Sensations. My name is Lynn Rosta, and today I'm going to share 2 new ways to enjoy our beautiful local blueberries. We're going to make a pan pie and a loaf. For our blueberry pan pie, we'll make a crust with 3/4 cup of butter, 3/4 cup of brown sugar, 1 egg, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 teaspoon of almond extract, 1 3/4 cups of flour, a half teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. The blueberry filling will be 6 cups of blueberries, 3/4 cup of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and 1/4 cup of cornstarch. Then we'll make a blueberry lemon oat bread with 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of rolled oats, 1 cup of sugar, 1½ teaspoons of baking powder, a half teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, the zest of a lemon, 1 cup of blueberries, 3/4 cup of milk, a half cup of oil, a teaspoon of vanilla, and 2 eggs. We're going to start with the pan pie. So in here I have 6 cups of blueberries, and these are frozen blueberries that I'm using. Nice local blueberries that I picked in the summertime and enjoyed them all summer. Now I have them in my freezer to enjoy the rest of the year. I'm going to sweeten those up with 3/4 cup of brown sugar, and I have a lemon here, a strange looking lemon, but I've already zested it because we're going to use the zest of lemon in the loaf. So I zested it and put that away because it's pretty much impossible to zest a lemon after. Whoops, a good save. It's pretty much impossible to zest the lemon after you juice it. So if you're going to use both, you want to take the zest off first. So we're using 2 tablespoons, so half is generally enough. I think I took the smaller piece there, but it looks like about 2 tablespoons. So I'll just put that one away, choosing something else. Clean up the lemon. We're just going to stir this together. So I've only ever made this with frozen blueberries, and they work perfectly in this, but the recipe says if you're using fresh blueberries, of course fresh blueberries are always fine too, but it says to add 1/4 cup of water to this filling. So you put this right in now before you put it on the stove. Now when I make my regular blueberry pie, I never pre-cook the filling. It just cooks in the pastry in the oven. But we're going to put this one on the stove and heat it up just till the blueberries start to soften and release some of their juices. And then we're going to thicken those juices with cornstarch before we put it in our crust. So I'll put this one on the stove. I'll try not to forget about it, but probably will. So bring this over and we'll start on our crust while that's heating up. I have 3/4 cup of butter here. And when you're making pastry, you usually use cold butter, but this is not a pastry per se, so I have softened butter here. I'm sticking with the brown sugar. I'm going to use 3/4 cup again. that in there. Cream those together. One egg. So rather than a traditional pie, we're making a pan pie today, so that means we're changing the shape of the pie, but we're also changing the crust because rather than a pastry, what we're making here is kind of an almond sugar cookie crust. We're going to flavor this with about a teaspoon of vanilla, and about a teaspoon of almond extract. And I have to admit, almond extract isn't something that I would usually pair with blueberries, but I may have to start because I love the combination of the almond and the blueberries in this recipe. Stop and give that pot a stir. Now we're going in with our dry ingredients. We're using 1 3/4 cups of flour, so we're going to start with the 3/4 cup. About 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. Now the other cup of flour. Here are those blueberries. Okay, now we're going to gather this up. So it's just a very simple cookie dough here. Cookie dough crust. Scoop it out. This just makes a nice change from your regular blueberry pie. So we have a nice little ball of cookie dough here. I'm going to bring over my pan. And I'm just going to start to press this into the bottom of the pan. So pan pies are generally baked in a jelly roll pan or a sheet pan or a baking sheet. And those are all just different names for the same thing, basically just cookie sheet with sides. And if you can see what I'm doing here, you're pressing it not so that it just covers the bottom, but you want to make sure that you build up an edge here, so you're making a little place to hold that blueberry filling. And I have my pan lined with parchment paper, which is good for two reasons. After the pie is baked and cooled, if you want to take the pie out and put it on a platter and bring it to the table to serve it that way, you can use the parchment to carefully lift out the pie. Or if you want to just cut it and serve it right from this pan, the parchment helps protect your pan from being all cut and marked up if you're cutting in it. So either way, the parchment paper is a good idea. So once you have your little shell made with your little raised edges, and the bottom looks even, just like a traditional pastry, you're going to dock it, which is just to poke some holes in it with a fork. And that just keeps the pastry or cookie from bubbling up as it cooks, forming air bubbles. And even when you dock something, I like to keep an eye on it in the oven, because even when you do this, it can still kind of puff up. But if you just poke it again in the oven, you can usually get rid of any bubbles. So we're going to put this in the oven at 350 for about 15 to 20 minutes, just till it just starts to turn a little bit golden, because we're going to pre-bake this a little bit before we put the filling into it. So I'll put this in the oven. I'm going to check on that blueberry filling, and then we can't do any more with this until this cooks. So while we're waiting for that, after the break, we'll start our loaf. Welcome back. We're ready to start our loaf. So we're going to start with the dry ingredients, which are 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of rolled oats, wrong bag, this kind for this one. Grab my huge bag of oats. I use a lot of oats, so believe it or not, a big bag like this won't even do me all that long. A cup of those. And a cup of white sugar. So those oats are a great thing to add to this loaf, because besides being one of the most nutrient dense foods you can eat, they're going to add a nice texture to this loaf. About a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. One and a half teaspoons of baking powder. And a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. Just toss that together. Now I have the lemon zest from the lemon earlier. So if you're going to zest the lemon ahead of time like this, just make sure that you cover it well with saran wrap or tin foil or something, because it doesn't take any time at all for zest to dry out and dry up. So as long as you keep it covered, it's fine. And here are those blueberries. Just going to turn that down until we get back to them. So we're going to add this zest right in with the dry ingredients. Toss that around in there. So we're using some form of lemon in both these blueberry recipes. Put this one aside for a minute. and whisk up our wet ingredients. 2 eggs. So I love the combination of lemons and blueberries. I usually pair them together, but the original recipe for this cake calls for the zest of 2 lemons. I only used 1 because I want to enjoy the combination of the lemons and the blueberries, and I don't want the lemons to be the only thing you can taste. Don't want them to overpower the blueberries, so I just used 1, but if you want to use the zest of 2 lemons, go right ahead. Also, if you don't have a lemon and you have an orange, you can use that, or if you just prefer orange. Oil. I'm going to keep this loaf nice and moist with ½ cup of oil. And quick breads like these are just so easy to make because they rely on baking powder and or baking soda for leavening rather than yeast. So you don't have to worry about kneading them or waiting for them to rise or anything. You can have them in the oven in no time. That's why they're called quick breads, I guess. I'm going to flavor this with a teaspoon of vanilla. And I have 3/4 cup of milk here that I'm going to add. Bring back the dry. Grab some blueberries. I have a cup of frozen blueberries here. So you want to take them out just before you use them. And I'm adding them in with the dry so that they'll get coated with the flour, and that will help keep them from sinking to the bottom of the cake. So you could use fresh blueberries in both these recipes. I'm adding the wet to the dry now. If you had fresh blueberries, you could add them right away when you're mixing up the dry ingredients, but with the frozen ones, you want to add them just before you're mixing these 2 bowls together, because you don't want them to start to melt and have their colors bleed into the batter. So it's a last minute addition. Just mix this together with as little mixing as possible. You don't want to over mix it, just until everything's combined. Blueberries are one of the only foods that are naturally blue. And the compound that makes them blue is the thing that gives them their amazing health benefits. And they are so amazingly healthy that they're known as a superfood. So that's all there is to that. So easy. I'm going to mix this up and put it in a 9x5 loaf pan. So both these blueberry recipes are really easy to make, but the pie takes a little bit more time and effort. But like I said about quick breads in general, you can have this one mixed up and in the oven in no time. The rest of this out here. And this is not an overly sweet dessert type cake. It's just a nice oatmeal loaf. So you could even serve something like this for breakfast. It's no different than a blueberry muffin, really. I wouldn't have a problem with having a piece of this for breakfast with some fruit or yogurt. So just spread it out evenly. Then this is going to bake at 350. The recipe says an hour. I always leave it longer. I find it takes like an hour and 10 minutes maybe. But all ovens are different, so just test it with a toothpick, insert it into the middle, and that comes out clean. Then it's done. So put this in. This crust is not done yet, but I'll take it out for a minute here and grab a spoon. I like to just take it out just before it's done and just kind of, I actually should have done this a couple minutes ago, it would have been easier, but just kind of make sure your sides are still built up, that it's not losing its shape. Yeah, a few minutes earlier would have been better, because I think this is basically ready for our filling. Put it aside for a second. Trying to check times here. So for our filling, I'll move some of this so you can see what I'm doing here. We're going to take cornstarch, a 1/4 cup of cornstarch, bring over the filling. It's bubbling away there. So the blueberries have released a lot of their juice, so I'm just going to take a spoon and scoop out some of that hot blueberry juice. Put it in with your cornstarch. Stir this together. So you get real kind of pure blueberry flavor in this filling, because it's basically just the blueberries sweetened with a little bit of brown sugar, brightened up with some lemon juice, and then we're just using this cornstarch just to thicken it all. So you have nothing to hide the delicious flavor of the blueberries. Now once you have that mixed into kind of a little paste, you pour it back into your pot. Make sure you get it all in there, because this is going to do the job of thickening this filling. Now I'm going to put it back on the stove. And it doesn't take long for this cornstarch to work. This mixture is so hot it's actually starting right here, but put it on for just a minute, just until it heats enough to bubble and thickens up. And then when we come back, we'll fill that crust and have a look at everything all finished up. Okay, welcome back. After you've pre-cooked your crust a little bit and you've cooked and thickened the blueberries, then we're going to pour the blueberries into this crust. So it's already thickened up a little, and it's going to continue to thicken up in the oven as this cooks. So you can see the change in the color of the blueberries, because as blueberries cook, their color darkens, so they're not as bright anymore, but still a beautiful color. And as they cook, the color darkens, but the flavor brightens. It's just the opposite, because as blueberries cook, some of their water content evaporates off, which concentrates the flavor and the sweetness of the blueberries. So once you have this filled, it's going back in the oven. just to finish cooking that crust and to cook the filling a little bit more. So it'll take about 15 to 20 minutes back in the 350-degree oven. So just keep an eye on it so it looks all bubbly and your crust is as brown as you want it to be. So cut a little bit of the loaf. And this would be nice with a lemon glaze on it, but I like it just like it is. And this freezes well. Travels well in lunch boxes. And you can freeze it, just take the whole loaf and wrap it well and freeze it, or freeze individual slices. That's what I like to do. And then I can send it in my husband's lunch for his coffee breaks, because it is a perfect thing for your coffee break. And this recipe also makes a nice cranberry loaf. All you have to do is switch out the blueberries with cranberries, and then you can stick with the lemon zest, or orange is always really nice with cranberries too if you want to do that. And if I was making cranberry, I'd probably throw in some walnuts in there too. So we'll cut a piece of our blueberry pan pie. And this is nice with some ice cream, or I have some whipped cream here today, so whatever you have. And if you had some fresh blueberries, a little sprinkling of fresh blueberries on the top would be nice. So just review what we use for our blueberry treats today. For our blueberry pan pie, we made a crust with 3/4 cup of butter and 3/4 cup of sugar, 1 egg, a teaspoon of vanilla, a teaspoon of almond extract, 1 3/4 cups of flour, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 6 cups of blueberries that went in the filling, along with 3/4 cup of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and 1/4 cup of cornstarch. Our blueberry lemon oat bread was made with 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of rolled oats, 1 cup of sugar, 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, the zest of a lemon, 1 cup of blueberries, 3/4 cup of milk, a 1/2 cup of oil, a teaspoon of vanilla, and 2 eggs. So I hope you were lucky like I was and you managed to fill your freezer with fresh local blueberries. I enjoyed them all summer, and now I have them in my freezer for the winter because they're perfect to bake with. It's so easy. You can use them fresh or frozen, and you don't have to you don't have to chop them or peel them. Just throw them into recipes just like these to let you enjoy them all year long. So I hope you enjoy these recipes, and you'll come back next time for Sweet Sensations.